there was a conversation about Black luxury has outpaced Black income.
So we used to chase assets. We were on that at one point in time. Now we chasing like just what things look like.
I think Black people, we've been chasing status for a long time because for a long time we weren't allowed.
According to the Census Bureau, the median Black man makes $50,000 a year. For Black women, it's $44,000. Somebody's lying.
I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is technology, the access to social media, for example.
What has happened is that we've created a cycle of debt. If you just consider modern times, then we know that hip hop has greatly influenced what we see in the world today. Speaking of luxury and paying to pay or paying to play, let's talk about Earn Your Leisure. So recently on Earn Your Leisure, there was a conversation about Black luxury has outpaced Black income. And so basically what they're saying that back in the day, we had a certain level of what we thought was luxury. So in the 90s and whatnot, Infiniti 45 was considered, Q45 was considered a great car that Nas, as an example, aspired to get. And now, though, it's a Maybach or somewhere along those lines. But at the same time, our economics, our income has not equated to actually be Black luxury. And so my question to you all, one, is this an issue in our community? Do we acknowledge that this is an issue in our community? And if so, why do you believe it's an issue in our community? And why do we chase this luxury instead of assets?
It's like it's cool with the uniforms. Everybody has a uniform on, right? Everybody's dressed the same. Now, some little girl's got to have a bow in her hair. It's a different color. Or if it's blue bows, now she got to have the blue and white bows. Or her shoe got to have a little something. Everybody wants a little sparkle. They want a little something different. Particularly when everybody looks around and notices that most of us, or most of the people in their same area, have about the same amount of stuff, right? So we start chasing this thing. Now, it used to be, though, that I think luxury was a show of your accomplishment. I mean, I got my money such that I've handled my business and now I can afford to have this kind of shirt, this kind of car, live in this kind of place, right? Because I've handled my business. And the reason you'd want this kind of shirt, this kind of house, this kind of place, because the idea was that you were now getting better quality that would last longer, right? You were moved up another level or whatever. But now we're at the point where we'll buy knockoffs just so we can look like we got it and we know we broke, which is kind of weird, right? Because we still didn't handle our business and we looking like we got money that we don't have. So I think it's funny. In economics, when I went to school for economics, one of the things they said was it doesn't matter how much money somebody makes until they have the adequate spending habits, right? Like recycling the dollar in the community or whatever. Until they have the right spending habits, nothing changes, right? You can get more money, they'll still go broke. So we used to chase assets. We were on that at one point in time. Now we chasing like just what things look like, people's height, the aesthetics. You know what I mean? We flexing Maybachs and Hermes and stuff, and our bank accounts is being on zero.
I think Black people, we've been chasing status for a long time, right? Because for a long time we weren't allowed. And I think for the people who had, it became a measurement of success of the things that we had accomplished, right? I think it's grown over access, over resources, over time, right? That Black people have started buying things that were outside of their means, right? Literally, some of these systems are created to put us in that box, like Lil Way, right? Yes, it helps a lot of people, but it also gives people to buy things that they can't afford. The extension of credit, it puts people in a momentary bliss because they can buy something, but if they can't afford it, and they can't afford to pay for it, then it puts them in financial debt, right? And so there's these measures that I think that we want to look and appear to be better off than we are because we want to keep up with the Joneses. And I think, yes, we've definitely status and all of that has definitely lapped some economics for Black people. And so I think it's normal to think that we overspend, we under budget, and a lot of us are wearing knockoffs anyway. Like we may think that that's a $500 purse, but that's really $40 from somebody at the flea market, and the world will never know. I respect people who get it that way as opposed to go out and spend $17,000 on a Birkin bag, but you stand and I've seen Maybachs and Bentleys in Section 8 housing, no lie. Like there's just there's something wrong with thinking that you can have one and then be at such a deficit at the rest of your life. clothes, shoes, cars should not be the things that identify what success looks like for you, right? So I think that Black people have been just kind of caught up in a cycle of misspending for years, but I think it was also purposeful.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, the joke was, when I was, getting right out of college, it was, if your car note was more than your rent, you're messing up. You're doing something wrong. I think a lot of it, especially social media, has exacerbated it. Somebody's lying, and I looked it up. I like to have my numbers in front of me. According to the Census Bureau, the median black man makes $50,000 a year. That's his median income. For black women, it's 44,000. But if you look on the gram, a lot of times you see people, Turks and Caicos doing all kind of trips, Sunday fun day every weekend, got the red bottoms, they probably painted on, but whatever. So somebody's lying. It's either debt, maybe scamming, you're getting the money some other kind of way. So it's all for liability. It's no asset. So I don't think it's even that we don't have the money. It's just we spend it on dumb shit. So it's flossing really for people who probably don't like you anyway, and they're broke too. Why you fall just going into debt to impress broke people? That's crazy. We need to do better.
So hold on, you said, Delvin, that it's not that we don't have it, because I'm gonna tell you, my brother, we ain't got it.
I mean, some
We ain't
have it.
got it, fam.
Well, it's
I hate
it's,
to
it's
tell
more
you.
of a. I mean that what I'm trying to say is like managing what you do have is really important. So
Yes,
yeah,
I do agree with that, right?
yeah,
But I feel like the crux of what we're talking about is the gap widening in regards to aspiration, right?
yes,
Because back in the 90s, when we're looking at the Q45, I think reasonably that was still aspirational for a lot of people,
maybe
right?
Alexis.
And now we're talking about Hermes and Maybach, things that are not generally going to be affordable for most people, but it's thrown in our faces. Why is that? I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is technology, the access to social media, for example, right? Growing up around our age, there were certain things that if we didn't go to the mall, right? Like, how were we hearing about it? Maybe in songs, right? There was a period where hip hop became very name brand or gear oriented to a certain extent. We went through different phases, right? And I think as hip hop grew, as people who made money through hip hop continue to make more money, we have a billionaire like Jay-Z. So the aspiration, I think, low key did grow with the heroes that we saw, like in the culture, for example, right? So when Nas was talking about the Q45, he was talking about it from a street nigga perspective, right? But now we see Jay-Z in private planes and being able to talk about having basque yachts and shit like that. So what became, I think, seemingly attainable for us also grew as the culture grew, as the enterprise of hip hop grew, and as certain people achieved more wealth. I think the danger, though, unfortunately, is that people use that as a standard, as opposed to what it's always been intended for, which is an aspiration, something that you can shoot for, that if you put the work in, maybe if you shoot for the stars, you won't land there, but you'll get somewhere close enough to where you have a great life regardless, right? I think that's how it's intended. But the problem is, I think that a lot of people have set this as a baseline for their expectations, especially when you talk about just life in general. Like, this conversation's about whether or not a 9 to 5 is good enough for certain women or certain dating spaces, right? Or if he drives a Honda or drives a certain car. Like, these people's standards now are really putting, y'all want to talk about the height thing? I get it, but I do feel like it's a little different. But when you talk about like things like the kind of car a person drives, especially if it's paid for, depending, like, to me, that's when you should really start to see how lack of financially literate we are sometimes, because the woman or the guy who's driving a Honda may be doing so because they're saving and stacking their bread, investing accordingly. Those are the traits that we certainly should be looking for. But because we want to, the Jones have outpaced the rest of us and we're still trying to keep up with them, right? The whole keeping up with the Joneses has always been a thing. But like, literally, when you talk about having billionaires, that wasn't always the case. For us, it was millionaires. Maybe the brother had 5 million, like, oh my God, that's amazing. Now brothers got billions or aspiring towards billions. So I think that's the core of it, that the people within the culture who have aspired towards great have reached higher heights. And then with the distribution of social media, making it seem as if everybody is reaching these higher heights as opposed to maybe renting it, you know what I'm saying, temporarily. You know what I mean? And so now that's added more pressure for us to then want to continue to be like the Jones. It becomes this repetitive algorithmic cycle, then unfortunately you have to be woke, right? I hate to use that word, right? But you have to be aware of what's happening and fight against it, because I think in some way, shape, or form, many of us find ourselves being influenced by this idea that we're validated by our material possessions and the types of things that we can show on social media. And I think that's where the danger lies, not so much just in the aspiration, but rather how it shows up for real, and whether or not we're able to discern the reality from the charade or the facade that's out there through social media. So
Yep. So I concur with this 100%. I just want to add a little bit more stats to the conversation as well. And so Black households in general have made substantial gains, though, in net worth. Now, please take this with a grain of salt, because when I tell you what the gains were between 2019 and 2022, the disparity still exists compared to white households, as an example, but the increase was from 12.7% to only 15.5% of the median white household wealth. This equated to only $44,000, basically. And however, it was considered like the largest wealth gain for any racial group. Now, mind you, we literally went from it was only a 3% increase, about give or take, right, to 44,000 as our median net worth. So I'm going to agree with Delvin that there are some folks out here lying on the gram, lying on the socials, because if the median is $44,000, there's no way in hell you can afford it made back. And what has happened is that we've created a cycle of debt. And this cycle of debt has left us in this so Tia, she mentioned how we got this credit, because in some countries they don't even have credit. You can't, if you don't have the money to buy it, i.e. the cash, the gold, whatever the case may be, to buy it, then you can't get it because they don't operate on credit systems. But we do here. We operate on credit. And that's another way to keep us in this perpetual cycle of debt, which therefore technically keep us as worker bees in the economy, because we have no choice because we're in this debt cycle. I actually contribute this to what I call the peacock theory. I'm not quite sure if you guys have heard of the peacock theory. I personally love it because I think it describes the Black folks in general, particularly, Black folks in general, although traditionally is associated with men, because men have the tendency to want to be the peacock and flash and do all this stuff to show that they and derive value. I know I saw the look, but technically, if you look up peacock theory, it does say that it's tend to be associated with men, because the men peacocks, as in the peacock, the actual bird, the men are the more flashy of the bird, and while they do their mating dance and so forth to attract the woman's attention, the female peacocks are actually pretty plain Jane looking and kind of boring. And so that's why they associated with men, while you was throwing me that look over there, Jay. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of where it came from. But anyways, so basically the peacock theory says, like, in displays of assets, be it appearance, behavior, or possessions, they're using it to signify like, oh, this strength or this status or this fitness, that I am this person, I can afford this, I am the man or the woman in some cases. And meanwhile, they're really just surviving. But they need it because, and so traditionally men will flex like the wealth, the cars, the clothes, and basically be shaking their tail feathers without actually shaking tail feathers. Whereas the women will flex the trips, the vacations, and so forth, because they're trying to say, hey, I'm free, look at me. And all this I'm free, look at me, or all this flexing is really just keeping us in a cycle of debt. And so I agree that what's considered luxury has definitely outpaced our actual income based on the statistics that we see. But not only just based on the statistics, but literally based on the fact that we stopped spending at Target and we was able to shut it down for the most part. So that tell you how much money was leaving our community. And if we think about the fact that in our community alone, the dollar was only hitting us, the dollar would hit our pocket once and then go out. Whereas other communities, it will cycle up to 7 times depending on the community. So I agree once again that we have hit a time in our life where we're too busy chasing this. And I must say that part of it comes from our history and is rooted in the fact that we felt like we do have to dress a certain way. We do have to be to meet the certain standards so that we could be taken seriously, or so that we can be considered a good Negro, as they would say back in the day. And then it ended up evolving to where the hip hop culture ended up taking over and telling us what we need to prioritize in our life or what we need to aspire to. And that's why music is so profound in our community. And that's why even the frequencies have changed, because they know that the frequency teaches us something too, i.e., generate certain emotions and thoughts and so forth. And so I will co-sign 100% on everything that was said. And I just hope that we actually take this conversation and other people take this conversation and realize that this is a problem in our community and it should be addressed. Now, will it be addressed? Like, we're taking the time to address it here and talk about the why, and or not necessarily the complete why, but how it came to be a little bit. But we can't really delve into it without going into our actual history. And if you just consider modern times, then we know that hip hop has greatly influenced what we're looking at, what we see in the world today.
I just want to add in, I'll tell you, technical difficulties. I think it's our perspective needs to shift. I think that we're not really looking like at the signs, the clouds in terms of the economic forecast. I think what we invest our money in needs to be more real things like real estate, real property, cars, but actual cars that you can drive without them hitting a pothole. And then you need new rims or whatever, like actual functioning vehicles and property. What we're looking at right now is it's like a perfect storm of really bad habits. It's a lot less money in the economy due to inflation and all those other the tariffs or whatever. Then you have the people are getting laid off, so there's less money that people are getting. Then you have these expensive goods that still want to stay expensive, and they still want to turn a profit, so the prices aren't coming down that much. You have people trying to show that they're not hurting financially when they are hurting financially. And now they're like, committing crimes or doing other stuff or buying fake stuff just to prove it. And so it's a spiral. And it's a spiral that's rooted in our need for somebody else to look at us. And if we can sell them our fake story, then maybe we'll believe it's true too. And it's got to stop, because that's really what it amounts to, right? It amounts to us as almost as a culture somehow not keeping it real anymore, and not wanting to live our truth, and not just stand on the fact that, yeah, this is where I am right now, but watch my hustle. You can see where I am now, because when you see my hustle, it'll be where it is. And I know that's a culture shock. I remember I'll say this in land. I remember years ago, there was a basketball player. I don't remember his name. It's sad too. Maybe it was Dominique Wilkins. Might have been, but I don't know. But he came out with a shoe, and the shoe was affordable. It was a decent, all right. It was an ugly shoe, whoever it was. And he came out with the shoe. The shoe was affordable, and nobody in the hood wanted it. And the reason nobody in the hood wanted it was because it was so affordable, and anybody in the hood could get it, and it wasn't a good status symbol. It had
It
nothing
was
to do
that
with the shoe.
Payless.
So, who was that?
But I get, they weren't that fly. Okay. I mean, have you ever actually bought Payless shoes for real? For real? I get the idea that maybe they're affordable, but them things last like 2 minutes.
True.
I didn't walk out the store good when I was a kid. I remember one time my mama bought me some XJ900s. They looked like they were Hirachis. I
I
wore
had
them. I was
those.
like, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to only wear them in the gym. They didn't make it in like one class playing basketball, fam. Okay, that's number one. Number two, listen, I get it because we're all financially literate here, but that is part of the shit that people got to deal with when it comes to just existing in our community. If you're a guy, for example, there's certain spaces and places that you can't even really go to and like present. She can't see past what the fuck you're wearing to get to know you for real. Right? Especially, like women may judge guys in terms of how they look, but also how they dress, etc. So guys sometimes in the dating market, for example, have to show up a certain type of way. Why? Because people are looking for those things. So I get it. Right? I would encourage guys to stay true to their finances, but I do think that guys who are making a couple of dollars, there's a way that you can play the game and be fiscally responsible still while putting yourself in the best position possible. I'm not saying you got to fake it till you make it, but I do think you got to present until you can kind of like move forward in your career. Like, for example, like you don't show up to the job and not wear suits if that's what your job calls for. Why do you wear suits? Because you want to present a certain type of way and move forward, right? So there are certain standards, right, that we adhere to. I do think the question becomes, if we're talking about just a level of luxury, because I think to me that's what the teeth of it is. Because once we start getting into like, hey, people should present a certain type of way, it just depends. Right? People got to go out there and fake it till they make it to a certain extent. Why? Because we're very like image conscious people. We draw conclusions about people based on how they fucking show up. right? Even if it's, even if we acknowledge it or we don't acknowledge it. So there's a certain level of this, but I think when it gets to like the outpacing of where luxury stands, I think it's great again when it's aspirational, but I just think it becomes a problem because what happens is because the luxury is so outpaced that the median of that is also outpaced for real, right? If you know what I'm saying? Like because people's vision of the end goal is way over here and you just start at zero and then the median is going to kind of just naturally move a little bit further away from reality. And there's just way too many people who I think are allowing that mirage of that extreme luxury affect how they feel about themselves, right? Affect how they see themselves, affect how they deal with other people. And I think that's where it really becomes a danger. But I do think it is important for people to have aspirations. It is possible for you to become a billionaire in 2025. Now, how possible it is, not very likely, but we are seeing people that look like us do it. And so I think it's great to see those, but it doesn't mean that we have to slavishly go out there and pretend as much as possible and put ourselves at a detriment.